Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Deepwatch's webinar today. Sorry for the little bit of delay getting started here, but we'll give everyone a few more moments to finish logging in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. A couple of housekeeping items. This is being recorded and will be sent out after the session. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer box, and we'll try to save some time at the end to get to those. And then for any general comments, you can go ahead and use the chat box. So let's go ahead and not waste any more time and get ourselves started. So today's webinar is on how companies address top security challenges and what security leaders can do. So today with us, we have Wes Mellons, CTO for Deepwatch. He's responsible for the security, risk, and compliance across all of Deepwatch. He has been in IT for close to 20 years, starting out as a developer, moving into networking, and eventually landing in cyber about 15 years ago. Also with us today, we have John Woods, Global CISO for R.J. O'Brien, the oldest and largest independent futures brokerage firm in the US. John is a proven cybersecurity professional and leader with over 28 years of experience who is passionate about efficient and effective cybersecurity solutions and making cybersecurity an enabler, not a hurdle. Since joining R.J. O'Brien in 2014, he established the cybersecurity practice and culture there, built and continuously grows their security team and pushes the cybersecurity vision and roadmap forward. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off, and I'll pass it over to you, John.
All right. So some of the challenges that we are all facing as so R.J. O'Brien, just in case anyone doesn't know, is, and this is the largest FCM. It's about 500 employees. It's a mid-sized company, which right now seems to be at the sweet spot of paying, as far as having all the problems of the bigger companies, but not the resources, right? With COVID, everyone shifted to remote work, and then that turned into kind of permanent hybrid mode. So, and with that shift, the amount of endpoints increased quite drastically, and which is going to be a permanent change. And the locations where they're at are much more just spread out. They're not all in the office anymore. They're at people's houses. While that was going on, ransomware concerns started to peak. So the cost of missing an alert, the cost of a breach, really went up. And those two things work together in a bad way. So if all your PCs get encrypted with ransomware, they're not all in one office anymore. Right now, they're spread out all over the country. They're all over people's houses. The ability to deal with that is harder than it was before. And all that happened while, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, the economy was not doing great. It's doing better now, but in general, resources were not and have not been super forthcoming. The IT department didn't get a lot of extra help because their footprint got bigger. We're not getting huge budget increases to deal with this. For a mid-sized company, that risk of missing an alert overnight, for example, for me, was a big concern, but hiring 8 people to cover, to staff a SOC and to be global in 24 hours is just not in the cards. It wasn't before and it's not now. So that's kind of the challenging spot that I found myself in, which led me down a path to try to figure out how to get up through it and what kind of outsourcing opportunities or services I could use to try to figure it out.
Cool. Awesome. Great insight, John, for sure. Especially someone, I know that has as much risk as your organization does in your vertical. Here's some common challenges we see today for some of the mid-sized organizations. We've got, a fair amount of customers in the enterprise, but also a fair amount down towards the lower tier. And I think while the issues are very similar, how you solve them is a lot different, especially knowing that most of your larger enterprises are going to be able to throw money and resources at problems Whereas a lot of your mid-size aren't necessarily going to be able to do that in the way that you would think that they could. The thing on this one, I don't want to read these verbatim, that really sticks out to me is just, limited resources, expanding attack surface. We've continued to see people adopt the cloud, people attempt to adopt the cloud, maybe not adopt it properly. People will be, shifting into VPNs. We have zero trust, which is a really big thing. And the workforce moving back to being very brick and mortar, but brick and mortar at home, brick and mortar at a coffee shop, not inside of your traditional data center or office. So something that we 100% see on a consistent basis, and something that I think, a good partner to partner with should be able to come across the board and be able to offer up solutions for each of these main ones. Modernization. So I think, these are some awesome stats that we see right here. Again, I don't want to read each of these out. The lack of expertise is probably the one I can resonate with the most, especially being, an MDR provider where the vast majority of our employees and staff are technical in nature and practitioners from an analyst, threat hunter, detection engineer standpoint. This is a really big number. There's hit or miss on people that agree with this, disagree with it. Don't want to push too many buttons, but I do think the narrative of lack of expertise and lack of cyber has probably hit the precipice. Something is lack of, something is, shortage, when it is that for a small period of time. But if you look back across all the numbers that are being thrown out from the analysts, we're pushing year 6, year 7, where there is a talent shortage. It's no longer a talent shortage at that point. It is a baseline. It's the norm. It's table stakes. That's what you have. That's what you have to work with. And I think the narrative needs to shift a little more from lack of cyber, lack of talent to how do we do more with less? There's also been a big shift in expectations from cyber and getting your foot in the door and being able to hit the ground running. If you look back 10 years ago, if you knew Nmap, if you knew Cain and Abel, if you knew a couple tools that were out there that were common, like you could go get a job in cyber. Like you knew enough to go get it. And now, what we are wanting from people to get in the door the bar has been raised so high that, there is a lack of talent, so to say, but there's not a lack of people. The amount of applications we get for every single role that are out there are not without, but it's the bar of entry has raised so high because of some of the, the fear mongering and everything else that goes on in the industry. Definitely a challenge that we see across the board. I don't know, John, which one of these really resonates with you, but I'm sure one of these sticks out.
Well, they all do. The one that,
they do.
resonates most with me at the moment is the cloud environment, security in the cloud environment. Cloud, for companies that aren't cloud native, it used to be the storyline is mostly around rogue IT, and that's no longer what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing instead is, developers want to build their next thing in the cloud, right? They want to use tools. The cloud is doing a great job selling. Microsoft is doing a great job selling Azure services to the developers. And then business stakeholders come to us with new vendors or software, but instead of it being, hosted by the vendor or software they hand to IT to install on the server, it's here's a workload for your cloud. Which cloud environment do you use, right? So the infrastructure department and the security department needs to have that worked up and understanding it. And simple things, then things that as a small company we had understood, like I know what my border is. I know what can attack me from the internet. Suddenly in the cloud is much more complicated. And that is a learning curve that people don't have time for. And that's a challenge.
I agree. We still see a lot of organizations struggle with the cloud. There's the concept of moving to the cloud, and then there's the concept of moving to the cloud, right? And or building in the cloud. Even some of the largest organizations that are customers of ours still struggle to rewrite legacy apps, tie them into SaaS services inside of the cloud versus just lifting and shifting a bunch of VMs. And I think that narrative, that transformational effort is still something that people struggle with. Not just, the mid-market, the SMB, but from the top to bottom, in the stack rank. Remote work, that leads us to a good one. We see this as a managed service provider, MDR provider today. All of our organizations had to rapidly adopt to remote work. We saw them struggle. We saw VPN concentrators get murdered overnight when, all of a sudden everyone had to be on VPN. We saw a lot of organizations ship people home with desktops, the Dell Optiplexes, like literally taking them to their house and then walking them through on a phone call, how to plug them into their router to then get connectivity. I definitely see this as a massive challenge inside of the industry. And I think, John, you were just talking about it, can probably elaborate a little more.
We absolutely did that exact same thing. We have brokers, which people would also call traders, that don't work well on laptops. We didn't want to pick up their trading system and move it to their house, and so we sent them home with new trading systems, and that became our new BCP plan, as opposed to having everyone show up at a remote site. The pandemic kind of put that on its head, and everyone realized that wasn't a good idea. That's a permanent fixture in their house now, as long as they're working here. It's still managed remotely. We have access to it. It's not an unmanaged device like you were thinking of, like years ago would have been. But that's part of the footprint that increased, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is, and both from an extra endpoint to keep secure, but then logistically more difficult if there's a problem there, right? Because it's not all in one place.
So how did, just specifically in your organization, did you shift and move to buying everyone laptops, or is the nature of your business itself still kind of reliant and honed in on those beefy desktops to do kind of the analytics and daily workload?
It depends on the kind of employee. So we're, about half of our employees are traders, and the laptops do not work so well for them. So they have beefy trading systems at their house with a big monitor, or at least one big monitor, depending on their setup. For non-traders, yes, we went with laptops. We also have a fairly heavy VDI environment, which we beefed up as well. So that was those were our main strategies to deal with it. And that became our BCP model as well. So we actually canceled our third-party contract.
Oh, wow.
Right? For a remote site, or if in the future, if our office has a problem, working from home is the backup.
Yep. I definitely think some key takeaways from this slide are going to be, as a CISO or even CIOs, CTOs, individuals responsible for tech and or risk of the organization, there's opportunities to do full reboot on your internal policies and procedures. What you had in place, 24 months ago is probably not applicable to what your operating cadence is today as an organization when it comes to either technology and people. Also new architectures. We saw a lot of people get forced into adopting remote in probably less than ideal way. And while it's good to get it up and running, it doesn't want to become steady state. So if you've been forced or shifted to adopt a more remote workforce faster than you were prepared, make sure you are looking at modern, innovative ways to handle security architecture, not only in the cloud, but for people working and your road warriors and individuals at home. So really good slide. It's got a lot of relevant information in it. Skill gaps. This one hits home for me because I still feel like the bar is so high within cyber versus the rest of most of your technical industry. And not to, make broad sweeping statements, but, your networking gurus, they're going to focus traditionally layer 2, layer 3. They're going to live inside of Cisco. They're going to handle WAN, egress, ingress, maybe some Palo Alto, maybe some Alteon, maybe some Riverbed, but a very, small scope as in what it is they are responsible for from an overall technology and strategy perspective. And if you look at your traditional enterprise, network is its own pillar, storage is its own pillar, app dev is its own pillar, infrastructure, AD, email, there's entire email groups that just do email. But in cyber, we have skated the past decade with most organizations being able to operate with a bunch of Jack and Jills of all trades, where someone's doing a little bit of incident response. They're also managing, maybe a SIM, they're managing some AV, maybe someone's bold enough to roll out DLP. And oh, by the way, they're probably also the same group that's doing policies and privacy and audits. The expectations and responsibility of a cyber team have always been much larger than, in my mind, compared to a traditional pillar of a very narrow focused subject matter expert group inside of your traditional enterprise. And what we're seeing now is organizations breaking away from the Jack and Jill of all trades and really trying to get focused, hone in on, you're only going to do this and you're going to do it better than anyone else. And that's hard. That's hard to organically shift from, one or two people managing 7 different platforms and lots of SOPs and day-to-day procedures to, hey, we want to find someone that's great in technology X, or we want to find someone that's really good in methodology or procedure or tactical execution on Y. So the skills gap is, I think, not a gap. I think it's the norm. And, once you hit that 3 to 4 to 5 years, it's no longer a gap. It's the norm. It's the expectation. It's the baseline. And I think as an industry, we need to shift and start looking at it as that, because we're not just randomly going to have 2 million people be great in cyber overnight. And that's what we would have to do in order to fill the open roles, according to, the analyst communities out there. So John, I don't know what your take is on, some of these categories and what you built over at RJO. And, are you still very much a Jack and Jill of all trades, or you've been positioned to start adopting some of the strategy of very pillar and subject matter specific roles?
So we have to do everything with a small staff. We're absolutely still Jack and Jills of all trade. And one of the, so I know exactly what you're saying. And from my experience of working with a lot of different IT departments in multiple companies over the last almost 3 decades now, what I think I've seen is everything in IT, including security, has gotten far more complicated over the last 30 years. And where infrastructure and like networking, like you described, those two now, if things are so complicated that they can handle it by relying heavily on their vendors.
Yeah.
So the network team can do a lot. I'm not saying that they're not smart. They're smart, but they very quickly get in a point where they need to call Cisco if something's not working right. Right. Same thing with infrastructure. They very quickly need to call their storage provider or Microsoft. Those contracts are important. And in security, one, that's not always an option. And second, you have to understand why, and you have to understand the context. You're kind of in a lot of ways on your own. And that makes it a lot harder. And that's part of the skill gap and part of why we need so much more from those people, because there isn't anyone to call a lot of times.
Yeah, I can't imagine you have, the means to go hire a threat hunter only group and, firewall only group and an EDR, DLP only group. The mid-market, you're never going to be able to build out those teams like that.
Never. Even if I could get all the staffing that's reasonable, it would never be the case.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. State of ransomware. So, as much as I like to say, and I know we kind of banter about it internally, like ransomware is not new. It's been around for a very, very long period of time. I think ransomware as a service and ransomware more as a commodity solution, and how to do some of the extortion that's happening today and it becoming very targeted attacks is new versus your traditional spray and pray. But when I think of ransomware and how ransomware impacts enterprises, again, we'll come back to John's statement on support. If you look at a lot of these big ransomware incidents that wind up on the news, they're calling the FBI, they're calling Microsoft, they're calling Cisco, they're getting all the big players in the game that are really solving the problem for them. They're just kind of signing the check in a lot of cases. I don't know that the mid-market, has the ability and or the pull to go get a lot of that. So what we see with some of the, the more down market organizations that struggle with ransomware today is, hey, there's no one for us to call. Like, how do we do this outside of reverting from backups and rebuilding brand new? And in a lot of cases, like, they don't even have the technical means or capability to do that. So like, from, your perspective, John, like being down market, like, how is ransomware, I would say, a risk in your environment or your risk tolerance for it within your organization, really knowing the limits that you have from a financial standpoint and a resources standpoint?
It's uncomfortable. How about that?
Yeah, it is.
So, we've put a lot of effort into it over the last couple of years. A lot of it is around, one, being able to recover, but a lot of the recovery is the data center focused. So making sure that the backups will be there and the backups work and that there's nothing they can do. And cloud storage, you can get immutable backups. You can make it so that no matter what level of access they have, your backups will survive. So that's possible. It's not free, but it's possible. But that doesn't help you when all of your PCs don't work and your PCs are spread through all your employees' houses. So there isn't a great option for that. That's going to be disruptive. Like, we'll be able to recover from it. We won't go out of business, but it's not going to be pleasant if that happens. And there isn't anyone we could pay to make that pleasant.
Yeah, you would have to roll a truck, so to say. Someone would
Yeah.
have to go to their house. They would have to get on that machine, physical involvement.
Well, and that's where paying, I think a lot of people like to pay, right? Because then if you can hand the decryption key to all your employees, they can type it in, and then a couple hours later their PC works. That's an attractive option all of a sudden. And I think that's why it works. But then the flip side of that is we've also put a lot of energy into trying to prevent that from happening. We get a lot of alerts now. You hate to be too confident, right? In this industry, but I think if that was going to happen, maybe the initial tech could slip through if they're really good, but as they go throughout the environment, I believe we would get alerts. We would be able to see it. I don't think we would be that caught off guard. But if you don't have people watching that 24/7, that could be 8-10 hours later.
Who's really getting that alert? Or is it just sitting there,
Exactly, and that's one of my challenges.
Okay. I do want to hit on something. You talked about pay and not pay, and I always, feel the need to come out and say it. There are a lot of people in the industry today that will provide their recommendations of not to pay and don't do this and don't do that, and here's what you should do. None of them are you during that bad day. None of them represent your organization, your board. They don't know what your risk tolerance is. And the fact is, most organizations do pay. So it is, don't go it alone. There's definitely DFIR vendors out there. There's ransomware negotiation vendors that are out there that will help you go through the exercise. And it's really up to your risk tolerance and your appetite to be offline. And is it something that in a very confident manner you can recover from without it? Or is it one of those like, hey, we're losing more money a day than what they want up front. Is that really worth it? And is that a risk tolerance? So if you ever do come in a ransomware situation, that's for your organization to make that decision on, not advice of, common bloggers and cybersecurity gurus on the internet.
Yeah, I would second that and say that at that point, there are companies that specialize in it, and they're the ones whose advice you should be talking to, because they will know, is this group sanctioned, for example, which is actually a concern if you're thinking about paying. And then from their experience, do they normally live up to their end of the bargain? Does the encryption normally work, or do they have a high percent chance? Some of them the data will be corrupted. So you can decrypt it, but it was corrupted as part of the process.
Still messed up.
So there's many companies that pay and then realize that it didn't do them any good. And so that third party can help with that.
Yeah, because there are definitely, you know, there's the Better Business Bureau for ransomware out there, and it is a business. And there are groups out there that they have better tech support than any company you've ever done business with. And they will respond to you faster. They have a cleaner portal that will blow away any ServiceNow and Remedy instance you've ever lived in. And they will get back with you immediately because they operate it as a business and they consider customer service. They consider their reputation something that is on the line. And one of those like, hey, we don't want people to not pay us because they think that their data is going to be messed up and we're not going to give them the encryption. So they try to stay true to their word. But then there's also a lot of, you know, what we call smaller, more immature, which are spray and pray, give us as much Bitcoin as we can get. We don't care if you get your data back or not. And they're being tracked. So there are organizations that are out there that track that. Definitely engage with one of those. Don't go it alone. And, you know, again, understand your risk and your organization's risk tolerance. 6 strategies. So I don't know that I'm going to go over each one of these. I think I can focus on probably the big one that hits home to us, not to go into a sales pitch, but deploy a SIEM, you know, have visibility into your environment. You can have as many tools as you have. And just like John's scenario, he said, who's really getting that alert? Who's looking at all those dashboards? Who's looking at all those panes? Especially if you're in mid-market and you have the Jack and Jills of all trades. Do you want them to have a Chrome tab or Chrome browser that's got 50 tabs open for 50 different dashboards? Like, try to consolidate as much data, as much alerting, as much visibility as possible into a single system, whether that's, you know, a SIEM or other terminology people are using with data lake and data warehouse and or XDR, depending on who you're talking to the day of the week. You have to have visibility. If you don't know what's going on with the technology investments you have, and you don't have eyes on glass, you're not doing yourself a favor. So I don't know, John, which one of these really resonates with you, but I would love your thoughts and opinion.
I mean, it depends on where you're at, but
in your journey, in your journey,
exactly. So, but email security is definitely, if that's not in great shape, you need to make sure it's in great shape.
Yeah.
So, and in email security, I don't want to rant about it, but it's gotten harder than when it used to be. When you're in the cloud, the concept of spoofing is not as straightforward as it used to be. It used to be it's coming in on the wrong interface, and so I can drop it. And that's not really an option. So you have to put some effort into Exchange Online to actually make sure that things are not getting through that should. And some of the attacks I've seen are pretty good. And you have to put some custom rules in, or it looks like, or spoofed emails can make it through.
Yeah.
And that's how they get in. The other thing is when you talk about deploying a SIEM, you know, getting all your alerts into one place is great, but again, to your point, somebody with some security expertise needs to be watching it. I've run into that where we have overnight support, but with no security expertise. There isn't a level of documentation I can give them to make it work so they know when to call and when not to call, because everything looks horrible if you're not used to seeing it. Everything looks like an attack, right? And think about what's important to you and create ways that you can generate alerts when something like that is happening. So think about how attackers work and set up customized alerts that will pop. So, for example, one of the things that we alert on is whenever somebody drops a command line and does a "Who am I?", we get an alert. And the first thing we look at is it an IT person, right? If it's an IT person, it's pretty easy to ignore. Occasionally that happens. And sometimes it's an install. Some installs do that for reasons I don't understand.
Oh yeah, that's an old technique.
But you know, when you have the nice little lady down the hall that there's no way knows what a command prompt is, let alone what type of valid DOS command in it, and doesn't have permission to install software.
Yeah.
Like that means something,
It does.
right? So you can come up with those things without having to even spend money, without having to buy deception technology. You can come up with some of those yourself.
100%. I think, I'd be remiss if we went to the next slide without at least calling out hygiene. There's a lot of amazing technology in our industry. We've all seen the Momentum Cyberscape. They do an awesome job of kind of correlating best of breed vendors in each different vertical that's out there. There's a lot to choose from. There's a lot that are the silver bullet. There's a lot that's the single pane. There's a lot that, we kill in the kill chain. None of that is ever going to be valuable if you don't do basic hygiene. Have MFA on egress, have legit password policies, have the concept of separation of duties for privileged accounts inside of AD, Cisco level 15, anything in the cloud. Do basic hygiene that I don't even know if I would call it cyber hygiene these days. I guess it is for what it is, but it's how to efficiently run a organization from a technology perspective and do what's right. Time and time again, we see organizations that are having a very bad day, and we all know what the bad day means, that have invested so much money in, whiz bangs. And it's like, well, we didn't do this one thing because we felt like it was going to hurt the business. And that is where, when does cyber and your brand reputation trump convenience? And it's something we continually see. And I don't know, in your space, John, like how much of a hammer, so to say, you have to drive some of that security over convenience. But we continue, even in 2022, with organizations that have, $50 million cyber budgets, struggle to do the basics really, really well, primarily because they don't have the full C-suite buy-in. They don't have a table, or they don't have a seat at the table. And business outcomes are always overweighing risk tolerance.
I tell you, the ransomware topic has made C-suite buy-in a heck of a lot easier. If it was a challenge up until now, it's less of a challenge now because they understand the risk. So if you, for example, if your employee base pushed back on having MFA for remote access, and you still haven't done it, now's the time. And ransomware is the way to be able to very easily explain why this is required, like absolutely required. It's not optional. And then if that still doesn't work, the other good technique is, even if you don't plan to buy cyber insurance, you can go through the effort to just kind of price out and fill out the forms to get cyber insurance with a major player. And they just lay out, like, this is what you need to do. These are the things that affect your price. And it's a pretty clear list. So that's very helpful as well.
Yeah, it's good to know. Good to know. I like it. All right. Things to look for in a MDR for mid-market. I won't read all of these. I think, me and John have I think John's done a great job of kind of honing in on, this is what we look for. This is the value we get, visibility. Are they helping you gain visibility and helping you drive your program? So I'm going to go back to the hygiene. Have an MDR provider that's going to be the subject matter expert, not someone that's going to be, staff aug, so to say, someone that's going to help you move your cybersecurity program forward. They're recommending MFA. They're telling you the right Windows event IDs you need to have. Their understanding of the concept of living off the land, not just give me everything you think about, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer. Let us tell you what you need to get the most value out of it. I think a lot of that is going to come down with visibility. Ransomware prevention, we've kind of already talked about that. If you don't have visibility into the endpoint, you don't have some sort of solution or offering around email, those are the two largest attack vectors today with ransomware. And then more importantly, is there, the concept of R and MDR? Is response there? Is mitigation there? Like, alerts are great. But just like John said, like, if someone's not looking at those alerts at 2 a.m., and some organizations don't have that capability, Do you want someone to submit a ticket and wait till you wake up at 8? Or do you want a risk that, has been deemed at your risk tolerance level to be mitigated on your behalf? I definitely think is super, super critical. And then, I'll kind of let John talk about extended team and ROI as someone who I think is consuming the service. And those are probably two of your big pain points today.
Oh, absolutely. So when I was looking at this, there was three main things I was looking at, and those are two of them. When I talk, as far as extended team goes, it's important that the people that you work with can actually learn your environment, because there's always going to be certain false positives that you can't turn off without blinding yourself. Yeah. And if all of your alerts go to a huge group of people that service all of their customers and never can learn your environment, they're never really going to be an extended team. And it goes back to a similar problem that I have now, whereas there's no amount of documentation that can explain all the context necessary, right, for someone who doesn't understand the environment. So one thing I look for is, are we going to work with a, not dedicated necessarily, but a small enough group of people who will be able to learn, my company's environment well enough to know whether they should wake me up or not, right? Rapid ROI, today, most of us, a good percentage, if not all, of our security alerts come from a cloud-based provider. So you should be able to get all that information through an API and basically hit the ground running with almost no work whatsoever on your side, right? And then everything else that you get internally is extra and it's added value. So look for that. If their answer is you have to do this custom stuff everywhere, all over your environment before we can start adding value, then that's a red flag, because they should be able to pull it directly from your cloud provider.
I agree.
And then the other thing I look for, which isn't really here on the slide, but it's kind of hard to describe in a bullet point, is I think about, how would I do this myself? If I had all the budget, I can hire all the people, I can spend all the money, how would I do it? How would I do it? Mm-hmm. If I was going to build it, what would I buy, right? Talk to my bar, talk to a bunch of my peers at bigger companies. What's the number, like 1, 2, or 3 SIMs? And like, if I was going to buy it and money was an object, what would I want? And make sure that whoever you're going with is using one of those. If they're using a technology you wouldn't want, or if it's custom, it's kind of a red flag.
I agree. It is definitely a red flag. And I think the speed and ease of deployment, specifically in the, the MDR space, and even if you go back traditional MSSP and MSP, no one wants to sign, a SOW and an MSA and transfer funds. Then it's like, hey, it's going to take us a month to get VPN set up and get access to your environment. Because I guarantee you, they're not waiting to bill you for a month. So, have a provider that's, not necessarily has to say doing zero trust, but like what John said, API capable, very fast time to value, very fast time to getting logs, being able to alert. I think that is key when looking at a modern MDR provider. So I think that kind of leads us into, your actual use case and study, John. So I'll let you really walk us through like what led us to the road and kind of where we're at today, and some of the challenges you had to go through, and hopefully some of the outcomes we're able to solve for you.
Well, so all the challenges I described pretty much in depth, right? So more spread out environment, bigger environment, ransomware concerns, lack of staff. I don't have a 24/7 SOC. My security team, I have a security team, but we're primarily in one time zone, right? Okay. Right around the corporate headquarters. So when I looked into Deepwatch, it's what I ended up going with, and it hit everything I just said. So it's Splunk on the back end, which is my number one option. It's not the only good one, but it's a very good one, right? And I've been working with the same group of people since we started. They understand the environment. It's not going to a a shop with 1,000 people, right? And it's 24/7. You know, we could work with them they know when to send us a ticket versus when to call us. And immediately we're getting value with very little work, because like I said, they were able to hook into our cloud providers, pull all that data in, and they were getting all of the alerts that we were getting right away. And with a small amount of work with them, they were able to understand the context well enough that I knew that if an alert came in, and then granted, it'd be the same alert we would get, but we were asleep, right? They would get it and go, hey, that one looks important. Shouldn't wait till morning. And then with small amount of work, they could get better, right? So then on top of that, we added the agent onto our internal Active Directory servers. So now there's more context, you know, point some firewall logs to it, some more context. So and neither one of those was a lot of work on our side, right? So with a little bit of extra work, it was even better. But with almost no work at all, simply giving them access to the API, I'm getting a SOC in effect, right? And that was pretty huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very, very, very great use case, and lots of other organizations I think are in the same spot that you were in, you know, 4 months ago. And can definitely leverage and find the right partner that's out there to, you know, like you said, Splunk. Most people, most organizations that are, you know, your size aren't really going to invest in Splunk and get the value out of it, because then they have to buy or they have to staff the resources to go do it. It's not a set it and forget it platform. It's very complex. It's also the 800-pound gorilla in a room for a reason, because it is the best technology that's out there. But how do you take that and again, focus on the outcomes and get the outcomes from that technology, as well as all of the other technology that comes with it, without having to go build that yourself? And I think, you know, the solution that we have here today at Deepwatch MDR Essentials is really the bread and butter of how do you still solve problems for customers that are in, you know, mid-market SMB, but not give them $1 million price tag, but still let them get the outcomes that are out of that. And that's really what we have developed today with MDR Essentials. It's a holistic solution. It's 100% cloud-based. There's no VPNs, there's no site-to-site. Just like John said, we can connect in on-prem, we can connect in cloud service providers, bring that data in. We have a very, very rapid onboarding timeframe. You're going to get all of the other things that you would expect and the value out of a MDR provider: threat intelligence, feeds, custom tuning, custom dashboards, alerts, metrics. How am I doing today versus how am I doing 12 months from now? And I think more importantly, it's the people. It's like John said, it's the individuals that learn the context of your environment, and individuals that want to help you in your cybersecurity journey, not just a team of 1,000 people that are first come, first out inside of a queue. You know, kind of why I think, you know, we probably already talked about most of this on here. It's affordable. It is a solution that is designed to still provide organizations the best of breed technology, all of the whiz bangs that you have, without the brunt of the work to A, fund those technologies, and B, fund the resources to manage, maintain, and mature those technologies. You get full on case management that's in there. We can do integrations or we can do standalone. And I think one of the key things is you're still going to get the 24/7, 365 support. So while you and your organization are home sleeping, just like John said, you've still got eyes on glass. They're there over the time. They're going to learn the context of your environment. They're going to understand your risk tolerance for PowerShell versus someone else's risk tolerance for PowerShell. And throughout that journey, you're still going to continue to get that tailored solution by individuals that really are an extension of your team. Fast setup. I mean, we already talked on that. Very, very fast. We're talking days, you know, hours for the tech to get implemented. It's fully automated. It's there. From a customer standpoint, that's typically what I would say where the clock starts ticking is, you know, how fast can the customer get up and running from a connectivity standpoint, service accounts, getting us what we need to start providing visibility. We have use cases today where that's been done in hours. And as soon as that is done, that's when the rapid ROI happens. So just like John said, We're going to put our analytics app on top of it. You're going to get all of the contextualization, all of the correlation. As soon as we start getting logs, you're going to immediately start getting value. And then the integrations, just like John said, massive capabilities to tie in via APIs, and take advantage of investments that you've already made as an organization. So not requiring that you go deploy something else or use something else. Like, hey, what do you have? How do we integrate with that? How do we bring back that in to start providing value for you? And that's really what we've built with MDR Essentials, and why we're really excited to have it, go live and open in the market today. I think that's it. So I will pause, stop sharing, and I think, Morgan, we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys, we did have a few that have come in, but if you guys have any more that you think of, please use the question and answer box. And since we have a few minutes, we'll try to get to as many as we can. So one of the first ones that I saw came in is, you mentioned XDR. What is XDR and how does it fit with MDR? Great
question. XDR is a mindset or an approach to solve something differently. XDR is not a vendor, it's not a product, it's not a logo. It's a different way of operating a SOC, with the focus on response capabilities. So not just SIEM, not just SOAR, which pretty much is all you need for XDR, but with SIEM and SOAR, what are you going to do with that alert? How are you going to respond to that alert? How are you going to action on that alert? So XDR is really, if you want to follow the narrative of the analyst out there, you had EDR. So responding on the endpoint, quarantining a host, isolating a binary, deleting a binary, flushing cache, which was really great. And endpoint has been king and queen for a while, but there are also other areas and opportunities to improve when it comes to response. So XDR is really taking that same mindset of responding to an alert, acting on it, mitigating the risk in a programmatic manner, and tying that to other pieces of technology, whether that's firewalls, whether that's WAF, whether that's CASB, whether that's identities, whether that's email. XDR is a different approach. It's not necessarily a vendor technology, but I'd love John's approach as the CISO himself on what he's seeing and what his narrative is.
I think you nailed it. I don't think there's anything I can add to that.
Okay, awesome. Morgan.
Cool. On to the next one. So what would be the number one thing then to look for in an MDR?
Ooh, the number one, man.
Number one.
I've got a long list of things you should look for. Core competency with MDR is alerting. How are they handling alerting? What is the volume of alerts? What is the efficacy of false positive versus true positive rate? I think all of the other things we've talked about, whether it's a squad and it's threat intel and it's hunting, it's detection engineering, there's AI and ML, those are differentiators that do really well in the sales cycle and provide additional value add when organizations come to an MDR. But at the end of the day, people go to MDR providers because they want relevant, actionable alerts. So what do you have and what is your mechanism to do alerting at scale that is very low volume, very high fidelity?
Well, I totally agree. I think digging into how do you deal with false positives, how do you deal with duplicate alerts? A lot of times you'll get the same alert multiple times from multiple different ways. And how do you hone it down to actionable alerts, removing the noise, but without blinding yourself, right? Because it's real easy to blind yourself in the goal of removing noise, and then you miss something important, right? How does that work? And basically make sure that they can really explain that to you in depth, and they know how they're doing it, and how you would work with them, because that's a joint venture. Good to do that.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, we don't have any more that have come through. I know sometimes they come to you guys later, so certainly feel free to follow up with us and we'll make sure that we'll get those questions answered for you. John or Wes, do you have anything closing remarks you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I mean, if anything stuck out for anyone that's on and you can relate to some of the issues that John's talked about, shoot an email to info@, Deepwatch. We're happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and a huge thank you to both John and Wes for taking time out of their busy days to walk us through everything. We hope you guys were able to take away some actions you could take to address these top challenges and mitigate threats. As mentioned, this is been recorded, so we'll go ahead and we'll send this link out to you guys so that you could rewatch anything or share with your colleagues. We hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you on the next webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.